This is the Unit 6 Getting Ready. I'm going to go over, work these problems with you to make sure that you are ready for what you need to know in Unit 6. Express the following percentages as decimals. So to get these into decimals, the first thing I'm going to want to do is write them as a fraction. Ooh, that's a little big. So I'm going to write this as 43 over 100. And then I'm going to use my calculator to change that to a decimal. So 43 divided by 100, and we get 0.43. 8 divided by 100. Of course, you could also just move the decimal 2 places. Right here is the decimal, and when you get rid of the percent sign, you move the decimal 2 places this way. It comes up with the same answer. So here's this decimal. When you get rid of the percent sign, you move the decimal 2 places. So this one's going to end up being 0.08. But you can also do this division right here, 8 divided by 100, and it comes out to be 0.08. Here's the decimal right here. When you get rid of that percent sign, you move the decimal 2 places that way, so that ends up being 0.892. So you can do it either way. You can drop the percent and put it over 100, or you can just move the decimal 2 places. Round the following decimals to 3 places. Okay, so if you're rounding to 3 places, this is the number and this is the one that you look at. So 3 decimal places, this is the one that I'm going to stop at, but this is the one that I need to look at. If this number right here is bigger than 5 or bigger, then you change that number to a 4. It's not, so this is just 0.783. And this one, this is the third number that we're looking at. This is the one that we look at. So this changes that to a 4. 0.784. This is the one we're rounding. This is the number that we look at. It's a 5, so we change that to a 4. 0.784. This is the number that we're rounding to that decimal place right here. This is the one we look at. It's a number smaller than 5, so that stays a 3. 0.783. Okay. This is the number that we're rounding. We look at the one to the right of it. So we look at this one. It's a number smaller than 5, so that remains 0.78, and you must put the 0. If you leave the 0 off, then it looks like we rounded to 2 decimal places and not the third one. Okay, so 3 decimal places. 1, 2, 3. Here's the number that we're rounding. This is the number that we look at. This number is smaller than 5. So we leave that 0.700. Be sure you keep the 2 zeros. This is the number that we're rounding because it's in the third place. This is the number that we look at. It's a number bigger than 5. So this changes. This changes to a 10, if you will. So this becomes 0.790, and you must put the 0. So that changed to a 10, if you will. And that means that the 1 needed to be added to the 8. So that's why it became a 9. And then we put the 0 because we rounded to the third decimal place. So we need 3 decimals. Okay. This is the third decimal place. This is the number that we look at. It's a number bigger than 6. So this is going to change to a 10. And this is going to be 0.800. We change this to a 10. That means we add 1 right here, which means that's going to go to a 10. So we add that 1 right there, and 7 and 1 make 8. Keep the 2 zeros because we're rounding to 3 decimal places. Express the following fractions in simplest form. Practice by not using a calculator. So when you don't use a calculator, you just factor. You try to find common factors. So what I mean by that is I know that 3, the only two factors of 3 are 3 and 1. So I tried to make sure that I could say 6 is equal to 3 times what? Well, that became 3 times 2. Those common factors right there will divide out, and that leaves us 1/2. So 3 over 6 and 1/2 are the same fraction. So 14, let's try 7 times 2. And since this one has a factor of 7, I'm going to see if 35 has a factor of 7, and it does. The common factors divide out to a value of 1. And then the 2/5 stays 2/5 when you multiply it times 1. Easiest way to handle this is to divide those zeros out, and then that leaves us just reducing 24 and 36. That's 12 times 2, and that's 12 times 3. The 12s also divide out, leaving me 2 times 3. Okay, evaluate fractions. In order to add fractions, it says don't use a calculator. In order to add fractions, you have to have a common denominator. If they have a common denominator, the rules say you just combine your numerators. So that becomes 5/7. If they don't have a common denominator, you see if you can change one, and you can. If I multiply this fraction top and bottom by 2, then it becomes 1/6 plus 4/6. Now I have a common denominator of 6, so I add the numerators, leave the denominator the same. And you can do that as long as you can change one into the other. You just have to change the 1. So this becomes 5/14 plus 7/14. Add the numerators together, you get 12/14. Because we can, we should simplify. That's 2 times 6, that's 2 times 7. So the final answer is 6/7. We have an 8 and a 10. You want the least common multiple. I think that you can change both of these into a 40. That may not be the least common multiple, but that's the first one that I come to. So in order to make this be a 40, we have to multiply the 8 times 5, so that means we have to multiply the top times 5. In order to make this become a 40, we have to multiply the 10 times 4, so we have to multiply the top times 4. So this becomes 15/40 plus 36/40, and the only damage that's done if you don't pick the least common multiple is that these numbers are a little bit bigger and you'll have to reduce in the end. But you often have to reduce in the end anyway after adding, so it's not a huge problem. We could have also used 80. Why 80? Because 8 times 10 is 80. But I like to keep my numbers as small as I can, so 40 is what came to me first, so that's what I did. So now you add 15 and 36, so that is 51, I believe. 51 over 40. Now, I know that that's a mixed number. It doesn't tell me fractions in simplest form, so maybe I should try to reduce it or change it to a mixed number. It didn't tell me a mixed number, so I'm probably not going to change it to a mixed number because it doesn't say. You can, but I think 51 is a prime number. If it's not a prime number, it doesn't have, it's not even, so it's not going to be divisible by 2. And 40 is just several different multiples of 2. It's got a 5. Yeah, so I'm thinking that this is the reduced form. I could check the answer key real quick. Let's go over here and see. page am I on? And we're looking for number 4. Okay, so yeah, it's 51 over 40 or 1 and 11/40. So I guess I will explain the 1 and 11/40. So 40 will go into 50 one time. If you take 40 away from that 50, you're left with 11. So the 40 that we can pull out of this, so make sure you understand that 40 plus 11 gives me 51. And the reason I want to pull that 40 out is because 40 over 40, this becomes a 1. And then I've got that 11/40 left. So when you've got an improper fraction, that's the way you figure out. You separate it into groups of 40. I got one group of 40 out, and that gave me 11 extra. So it's 40 over 40 plus 11 over 40. That 40 over 40 becomes a 1. And then 1 plus 11/40 is 1 and 11/40. So either one of those answers are correct. Evaluate. So now they want me to multiply. When you're multiplying, it's just top time top, bottom time bottom. You can check for common factors before you multiply to keep from having a hard time reducing big numbers. There's nothing in common on the top and bottom, so you just multiply top time top and get 8. And 3 times 5 and you get 15. And I don't believe 8 over 15 will reduce because it wouldn't reduce here. Here, I've got a 21 on top and a 21 on bottom. Those will definitely cancel each other out. 21 on top, 21 divided by 21 is 1. So the answer is 2 over 37. 37 is not an even number, so it won't reduce. Here, this 3 will go into this 6, leaving a 2. So that means 2 times 2 is 4, 1 times 7 is 7. Evaluate the following. Express your answers as fractions in simplest form. Do not use a calculator. All right, so this, you multiply these two together. You get 2 over 9 over here. You get 2 over 9 over here. And that ends up being 4 over 9. On this one, nothing reduces, so you end up with 5 over 24. Over here, you probably can reduce this, but you don't want to because, yes, you'll get a smaller denominator, but it won't be a common denominator, and we want a common denominator right here so that we'll be able to add these two fractions. So even though I can reduce those 3's, I have a reason not to. So this becomes 6 over 24. And now we have common denominators, so we can just add 11 over 24. Okay, the last one. There are 36 students in a class, and 20 of them are girls. If the student is selected at random from a class, what is the probability that the selected student is a girl? So we want the number of girls out of, we're selecting from the whole class. So the number of things that we're interested in, the desired event, that number goes on top. And the total number of things that we have to choose from goes on bottom. So we've got 20 girls in the class, and we've got a total of 36 students, so you make that a fraction. And probabilities can be answered in fractions, decimals, or percents. So I'm going to reduce this if I can. Let's see, 20 is 4 times 5, and 36 is 4 times 9, so the 4's will reduce out. So the probability is 5/9, and you can change that to a decimal, or you can write it as a percent. So 5/9 is 0.5 repeating. So 5, I'd probably leave it as 5/9. 5/9 is about 0.5 repeating, and that's about 55.5%, and that's repeating. So I guess since I'm doing repeating, it's not about. It's exactly. So those should be equal signs. If I round off 5/9, I could say 5/9 is about 0.5, which is about 50%. But you see right there with the rounding, I got quite a bit of different answer on the percentage. So just be careful where you round. You could say about 0.55, and then that would be closer, 55%. So this would be the exact way to do it. And since this is a repeating decimal, I wouldn't even go with the decimals unless they asked me what the percentage was. I would stick with the exact value, which is 5/9. Okay, lots of little fraction rules. So you got to be sure you know these fraction rules for Unit 6.